Hello and welcome back to the Awakening Philosophy Podcast. My name is Jed. We're in the book that bangs the hardest and the most, drops so many wisdom bombs on your ass, it will give your grandchildren post-traumatic stress disorder. So, we have been pulling together the parts of the text into a map or model of reality. The different stages of cognitive development, the different stages through which all living beings evolve, including us, allowing us to identify the stage that we are at individually and collectively, and what must be our next stage. What do we have to learn to progress in our development to be able to overcome the problems we're facing currently and move into a higher form of excellence? A map or paradigm of the whole, which accounts for parts. So that's pretty neat. But we have also, last time the book has moved us on to, hey, by the way, if there are these different levels or dimensions of reality, the higher, more causal of the lower, or the greater, more causal, and having more scope, and having a higher degree of truth and reality over its creations, or the cause over the effects. How does these higher dimensions affect lower dimensions? In other words, how does the self give birth to mind, and how does the mind generate each moment in our physical world? And finally, how do we progress? So 3 primary questions that we have to see the significance of, says Socrates to Jesus in this great dialogue in heaven. How does the self generate being, and how does being generate becoming? And finally, how do we return? How do we progress through those stages ourselves individually? And as we've been seeing, that the same problems we face individually is the root cause of collective problems. We could say, how do we evolve as a species? So, fundamentally, we have where's a simple map that we've got? Here we go. Human problems are caused by something called belief, which is based on a physical appearance from which we we ourselves infer a whole or a fake model. If this is the way I'm being treated when I'm 4 or 5 years old at home, then this must be what it means about myself and reality. So a false model about self and reality, and our lives become a playing out of a thinking derived from that fake model. That's the cause of individual problems. Collectively, it's just that, but universalized. It's not my belief that we are the chosen family. God has chosen us. So religion is just the universalization of somebody's personal beliefs from childhood they haven't reflected on. Another way of projecting beliefs is government. The law says so. So the 2 professions where you don't have to have an actual model that's universal and understandable and true, like medicine or flying a plane or how to fix an engine, everything else is kings and clergy. Religion and politics is a place where you can project your belief onto everyone else and play out your injustices, causing our collective problem. So that's analogy, as above, so below. The same relationships apply, but you can extend it to different terms or sets. So as our parent inflicts their personal beliefs on their child, a kind of tyranny, unless of course they give up their loyalty to their family clan beliefs and they engage in understanding, which is rare. I haven't seen that happen before. So too, different terms, the priest, the minister, the pastor, the pope claim to speak for God and project their own beliefs onto their followers, their slaves, whatever you want to call it. And we know that because there are thousands, hundreds of thousands of people claiming to speak for God, and not two of them have the same ideas. And of course, any one of them you could reflect on their own personal beliefs and trace it back to how they grew up. Not hard to see. Okay, so we can recognize that as here. In the physical world, we could put a circle around that and say, hey, human problems are a rejection of the whole model. Or, using this here, parts that are in opposition to the whole. And why is that important? Because whole and part are primary units of thinking. Everything you've thought about is distinguishing a part from a greater whole, background from foreground. And everything you think about, you could distinguish its parts and how they come together into a whole of an idea. Everything you've experienced has parts and has a whole, or you infer the whole from your physical appearances, like this. Everything that exists has parts into a whole. These are primary units of thinking, perception, existence. We call them the selfers. Why? Because they have their own self-existence as a noun prior, in the realm of being or mind, prior to their use as adjectives in our physical world of appearances. So, we're all doing this. We're all stuck in a cycle of repeating problems, which is nothing other than our thinking or functioning reverting on our false model that we don't even know we have. We just take it for granted and projecting that out onto the world. Projection. Ever notice when people are in their problem, they project? And by the way, in response to the projection, they do that very thing. So cry bullying. I'm the victim. Look at all these people victimizing me. In return, I'm going to do the very thing that they are doing to me. Why? Because that's their whole model. Reality is this kind of injustice that they suffered from in childhood. But also, hey, if this is reality, what are the parts of reality? Goodness, truth, excellence, power. Then I need to be this to somebody else so I can be good, so I can be real. So this also motivates our relationships. If you're interested in somebody beautiful or powerful or knowing or good, then what's your model? Because that will guide you in who you select for your friends and relationships, keeping us stuck in the repeating cycles of problem endlessly. Doing the very thing that was done to us, do unto others what we had suffered, and projecting onto the world that same belief. So we say of people in their problems, every projection, every accusation is a confession of the right wing. Because the right wing political party is nothing other than a group bound by this. Bound by a fundamental false belief about themselves and reality. The pathologos. They're the pathologos party. So we're doing this thing. Or we have a choice. We can do one other thing. You're doing this anyway. Why not do it well? Why not use your thinking or functioning to revert upon the model of thinking or functioning itself? In other words, you're using your mind. Don't you want to know what the mind is? And by the way, by reverting upon the model of the mind, you gain the excellence. If the model is the ideal or paradigm, then the closer you are to that, the closer you are to your excellence. The closer you are to doing the ideal backflip, the closer you are to the excellence of gymnastics. So really what we have is we recognize, well, we have this thing that motivates every moment of our lives. Our perceptions go through our thinking. Our choice of actions go through our thinking. Our choice of goals go through our thinking. We're always thinking. Our choice is whether or not we want to use our thinking in the one correct way, or really the only way, to revert upon the model we're using that our thinking is manifestation of. If you don't, you will be a zombie. You'll still be reverting on a model, only it'll be a false model based on belief that you derived from physical appearances that is the cause of your human problems. Ignorance. You're doing it anyway. You're meditating on a model anyway. Why not find the correct one? If you do give rise to truth, goodness, whole, excellence, lovingness, caringness, the eternal, the universal, all of these terms of excellence. If you don't, you have their false derivatives: injustice, badness, false, miserable, blocked, blind, harmful, etc. So, those primary units of thinking and perception and reality, whole and part, we could arrange as a Venn diagram to say, hang on a second, the model has to be a whole, here's whole, of all parts. Whereas to remain a believer, you have to reject your capacity to know the whole. Why would you have to believe the guy in the funny hat telling you jeebus this, jeebus that, projecting his bullshit beliefs by saying, God thinks so? Never read the book. Never reflected on the text the way we have been doing in reference to the logos of Mark and Paul and John and their own personal pathologos and how much of their own personal beliefs they've projected. Equally so, what can we derive of the logos and pathologos of Jesus? What's his highest apprehension of the model, the brilliant light of being, and his thinking or understanding about it? This knowing of the model and understanding of it, we put together as wisdom. And what role did Jesus' false beliefs play as a result? That's how you would have to read everything, because every human being is at some level of development of wisdom, using thinking properly to reflect on the model. We call that understanding and knowingness, or dianoia and nous in the Greek, and at some level of enslavement by their personal beliefs and their ignorant thinking as a result. Ignorance. Therefore, we can ask, hang on a second, if the model is the whole of all parts here, why would we not all want that? Therefore, there has to be a necessary element in our personal beliefs that has to reject the whole. So we can even number these things. We can say, hey, this part here, this part of the Venn diagram, look at these two circles, that rejects the whole, that keeps it as a part. We could say, hey, this way of thinking, way of using our language that rejects the whole, we could call materialism. Or there's only the physical parts. There's no whole, there's no mind, there's no self. The tradition of Aristotle, modern academia, empiricism, reductionism. If you can't put it in a test tube, it's not real. So we have to torture them monkeys. Torture the monkeys, torture Mother Nature so she will reveal her secrets. Modern science. Good for torturing monkeys and making nuclear weapons. Nothing else, really. Unless, of course, you have an understanding of the whole and where you want to use technology. So 5, to reject modern Democrats. There is no whole. the establishment dems. There is no whole, there is no model, there is no paradigm. Everyone's just out to get their own bag. Let the fascists take over so long as I get that corporate lobbying money. Who's to say what's right and wrong? Says Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and the rest. 5. Number 4 is beliefs. Hey, if they are not demanding a paradigm, every doctor has to help every patient. There can't be a clan of doctors that call themselves Republicans that murder some patients because they don't like them, because they're different from their family way of being. There's no doctors that prescribe medicine for their own personal profit and not for the benefit of their patients. There's no architects who have their own math where 2 and 2 is 7 because it saves money on building materials. Oh, but the houses will collapse and kill everyone. But we save money. We get more profits. There isn't same thing for any profession. Why don't we demand a universal paradigm, principle that is understandable by everyone? Because fivers, dualists, there is no strict dualist, there is parts, no whole. The left wing, establishment left wing, create the conditions for those who say, yeah, there is a whole, but it's our team, it's our beliefs, it's our color, it's the rich people. No, it's the rich people, but they tell it's you, the poor people, but the immigrants, the browns. Our family clan of beliefs are the good ones. Everyone different from yours is the bad ones. Vote for me. They're lying, of course. They're manipulating the beliefs of the many. So that way of thinking where you can be manipulated, or you are fiercely loyal to your beliefs and manipulate the beliefs of others, is 4. So strict dualism or materialism, 5. Belief-based cognition is 4, both of which function together because even a materialist has their own unsuspected beliefs that gets them so fervently attached to their rejection of the logos, of mind, of the whole. So 5 creates the conditions for 4. 4 is fascism. Individually, that's our own tyranny. Collectively, through religion or politics, it's the tyranny of mankind. Now, understanding reverts on an actual model. We can call that 3. Understanding the model of medicine, understanding the model of how to fix a engine. That cognitive function through which we use these terms we're using, whole and part, same and different. Understanding is 3. Knowing the model itself is 2. And of course, our question is, what is the activity of the whole that's even greater than the parts? Not the whole of all parts. The understanding and knowing of that together, 2 and 3, is wisdom. But what is that section of the Venn diagram that's the whole that doesn't touch the parts? Parts can't reach that height of greatness. What we've also seen is this Venn diagram of whole and parts that accounts for all human problems or ignorance, that counts for wisdom, including the highest spiritual experiences. We could also say, hang on a second, same, different. Believers are always different from other groups. There is never a sameness with others. Limit, unlimit, we could throw that in there. To be a believer, you have to accept certain limits. Only marry Mormon people, never read Harry Potter, believe that you are a sinner, believe women are less than men. All this horseshit is limits. And fundamentally, the cognitive function of belief itself has to reject understanding and knowing, wisdom. Therefore, you have to accept a limitation on your own use of your own mind. In principle. Whereas if you could use your own mind with wisdom, understanding, You'd be free or unlimited to make all the analogies you like. Have fun with it. Express this as we've done today with mechanics and architects and surgeons. Having an apprehension of the true model allows you to have fun freely expressing it. Limit, unlimit. So our question, by the way, self and other. The self is the most primary because you can talk about wholeness itself, greatness itself, sameness itself, freedom itself. So the highest term of all of these sets is self and other, which is fundamental because we want to know ourselves. But that means that when we apprehend the model of reality, we're experiencing ourselves as a whole of all parts. We are experiencing ourself as sameness, but accounting for all difference. We're experiencing, let's throw a limit in there. We're experiencing unlimitedness, freedom, infinity, while also being completely self-contained as a oneness. Unlimited and limit. This is the fun you can have if you recognize that that reality is a playing out of fundamental duads or pairs that you can understand. You can have fun explaining in many different ways the nature of ignorance. Hey, ignorance, it's a belief because it's you accept a limit. And by the way, who do believers kill first? The thinkers, the people who are free and they're not accepting your God or your bullshit rules or your oppression or your slavery. Yeah, they go after the free people. By the way, are believers always apart? Different from the whole? They're always different? So you can have fun talking about it, understanding it, making connections. And the ultimate question is, what is the self? What is this part of the whole that isn't even touched by parts? Because it's the cause of, this is our question of causes, how does the self here cause mind? And how does mind cause the physical world of appearances, through which we derive our ignorance? But once we recognize that this model is understandable, logos, there is an intelligibility we can understand of this model, meaning we have a potential to not only get our ignorance by imitating wisdom, parents pretending to be wise when they ain't. Everyone's family, it's not just yours, don't take it personally. But it shows that the fact that we do have a thinking that reverts on a false model of belief tells us we have the capacity for actually gaining control of our thinking or freeing our thinking to reflect on the true model, wisdom. Meaning we can, and by the way, we can use that understanding of the model as we are doing now to recognize the nature of human problems. And so long as we have someone or something giving us the clues of the specific origin scene through which we derived our false model, then in principle we can solve all problems. Because problems is just a distorted use of thinking on a fake model, when really once we're free, we can use our thinking on the true model. And by the way, that true model, as we have on the board here, explains ignorance. Explains problems. Problems are rational, understandable. And so long as we have enough clues to unpack our specific, while this applies to everyone, each individual problem is different, Meaning, so long as there is some way of getting clues about our particular personal problem, everybody's problem is solvable. By the way, we get that from Homer. Even the worst person, Achilles, can solve his problems. In principle. By the way, once we reach that experience of wisdom, we can ask the question, oh, hang on a second, if this is the whole of all parts, what then is the cause of that, the whole which transcends parts? The self that isn't touched by other. Now we can go one step further and say, hang on a second, if this is a hierarchical arrangement like a pyramid, the most causal being more primary and more real prior to its effects, we could say, well, actually, by reaching this stage of self, which is the reflected into self and other, and then into our ignorance of just other, if it's all a reflection, or rather this kind of creation is a shadow, mind is a shadow or reflection of self, and then mind turns upon itself to create a copy, so there's the model copy. And need necessarily, because to have a model copy, you have to have elements like a model and a reflection on the model and a judgment of whether or not it's true. In other words, there has to be parts here that are used as a whole for a model copy, like a painter. But because the whole without parts doesn't have those parts, it has to create more immediately. So we call that the reflection or shadow. So if the whole of all parts is a reflection or shadow of the self, then that reflects upon itself the way that we can use our thinking, in the only real way we can use our thinking, to reflect on the model of thinking itself, turn upon our mind. To know what, hey, you've got a hand controller in your hand, you wake up in a video game. You got to figure out what buttons to push, and also what the goal is of pushing the buttons. That's the model. What things you have, you can use whole and part, you can use same and different, you can use unlimited and limited. There's a whole set of pairs. There's 6 primary ones. If you apply it to this section here, you get the truth of all of the goodnesses, the truth of excellence, of beauty, of orderedness or harmony, of justice. So this is our model for reality. This is the model that every politician and spiritual leader needs to have an experience of and understanding of. That's wisdom. And its distorted reflection is the cause of our ignorance. While it's this being that's reflected in time, in our physical world of becoming. So if that's the case, then really this self which transcends other also is the source of all other. In other words, is there a way of perceiving that this distinction between self and other isn't real, but rather other is a physical appearance, which reality is false, or is a copy? Isn't true reality which is here? Well, the truth of reality which is here, and true reality which is the self. So in the experience of going through the truth of reality, mind, self knowing itself, wondering about, hang on a second, if that's truth, there has to be a true. Just as if this is a oneness, there has to be a one. If this is a goodness, there has to be a good. In recognizing the one, the good, the true, the whole that's without parts, the same without difference, are we recognizing that the self and other is really just self? Is other, it's its reflection and affording us the ability to see ourselves? So there is no difference? there is no difference. Here, at this level of reality, there's no difference. There's no limits. There's no parts. There's no otherness. Could that be why it's true excellence, true beauty? The one, the true and the good self? And then, if at every level there is a model and a functioning, or a model and a thinking, or a beingness and all at onceness, or ousia and a logos, how do we know this? How do we see the one that's without difference, or the same without difference, the self without difference, the self without other, the self without limits, the self that transcends time? So here we can add one more set of terms. Out of time. And in time. The out of timeness of self, in which there is no time, rather than wisdom, the out of timeness that incorporates all of time at once. Necessary for justice because it's the goal, it's the end goal. That to which all parts move, a union of all parts. The model of justice, which we must demand of every spiritual and political leader. No belief, no belief, no belief, not ever. This applies for any galaxy. Do your leaders, do your mechanics just believe that they know do your dentists just believe they're dentists? Then of course they're just hurting children, smashing their face with hammers, because they have no understanding of the model. No apprehension of the model and understanding of its parts. They don't have a whole and part of the excellence. Do your architects build buildings that collapse on families? Then they're using belief and they don't have an understanding. Do your politicians bomb children? Harm children in all sorts of different ways? How many ways has Trump been harming children? Murdering them in Palestine? Gestapo ICE police to abduct, rape, murder children who happen to be brown because he's galvanized the tyranny of the believers. What other things has Trump done to harm children? Let me think. Children taking away medical care, taking away food assistance. Anything else come to mind? Maybe we could make a list of all of these ways. Of course, we don't have to live it out if we have the model. That's the significance of this kind of understanding. Knowing the model, you don't have to play out the implications. We don't have to say, okay, let's have some surgeons who use belief that they should only help certain people. And when there are some patients that come into their office, by the way, this does happen sometimes. When women come in, they will abuse the women. Yes. And let's see how that plays out for the health of our society. You don't have to, because we know as a principle, these are the principles. That's that middle term here. Wisdom is an apprehension of the model of mind and thinking, and because it's a model, it contains all of the principles for any use of the mind. That's understanding and knowing. In opposition to belief and materialism. Materialism or strict dualism, part no whole, 5. Belief, 4. Both in opposition to truth, goodness, beauty, justice, while being fervently attached to the pseudo model, fake, false, blocked, harmful, ugly, unjust. Always, this applies to any galaxy, any race, any time. So therefore, what is the model of self up here? So we got the physical world, mind, and self. What would it be like to know the whole without parts? We can imagine what would it be like to collect all the parts together into a whole paradigm. And we could imagine what it'd be like to experience that kind of perfectly ordered, harmonious, call that beauty, the truth of beauty. The peak experience, if by experience you mean some collecting together of whole and part. So experience would be like this. The height of experience, the whole of this circle with all parts from this circle and all the other duads, selfers, to bring all the differences into a sameness, a manyness into a one. Therefore, what is a kind of knowing or model or ousia of the self that's different from any other experience you've ever had? And finally, what's its functioning? How do we know and show the self? Know thyself. That's the big question. What kind of a knowing would this be? And how do we get there? So in this model, we've accounted for wisdom, the model that would bring health and excellence to any society and individual, all human problems at any culture in any way, in individuals in the collective, how it's not a blame game. There has to be problems. There has to be a playing out of whole and parts because it's a paradigm, which means it has to play out in every way, including cognitive functions, because we are here, all living beings have to experience it. Meaning, of course, there's going to be a belief and materialism. And of course, it's going to be always the source of badness and problems and ugliness. Has to exist, so it's not a blame game or a shame game, but we can recognize it as simply stages of our evolution. And finally, we can recognize wisdom, ignorance, and our goal to know the self. What's the final cause, or that to which we are moving through the logos? How do we use this thinking in this kind of a way, just as true use of thinking is to revert upon the model of thought itself, mind? How do we use our mind or thinking to revert on the self? How do we use self to know self? What's that kind of use of the logos or reason or thinking? And what's this kind of knowingness or ousia? Now in the book we've been saying, hey, by the way, even though you could call this model an immediateness, an immediate knowingness, just as enlightenment or oneness, nous, is a turning about upon mind, so a kind of separation of your from your physical senses, which happens in death. So the brilliant light of being we experience in death to some degree, depending on how much we've nailed this down and how much we've removed our ignorance and perfected our own wisdom. It's like believers don't have to think. They say, oh, I just know Jesus is everything. I know that whatever my mummy and daddy or my preacher or minister or rabbi says is right. I just know it. I don't have to think. I don't have to give reason. It's just immediate and wrong. And of course, always wrong and harmful. What kind of immediate knowingness of self would there be without parts, without difference, and out of time? And what kind of functioning would self do? How would you function in that kind of immediacy? Because that's our goal. It's what we want. That brings us to where we are in the text. Time. If there is time, like a film strip, for there to be motion, this moment has to return into the gap between each frames, because like with film, or our eye taking 30 something pictures a second. And then from that gap, there is an emerging into the now. So there's an instant in the gap. Which accounts for how that model plays out in experience. In other words, how do we return? So our question is, what is this gap? And what does it know for it to create the next moment perfectly appropriate for the next, so that my shirt stays black? But not only that, the thoughts that come up in my mind are perfectly appropriate to my own development through that model, from ignorance through wisdom to know the self. What must it know? How immediate is the creation of model to copy? By the way, in time and out of time fits in here. This is called Parmenides' third song, or the third hypothesis. How do this and this relate to this? Our physical appearances, or the physical world. There's our physical appearances, where we can derive fake models of belief. How does this kind of wisdom that Socrates calls the immediate pure phronesis of self affect the physical world? And what role does the wisdom, or the model of everything, what role does that play? So how does this wisdom here and phronesis here affect each moment? Phronesis is a funny word. It's Greek. Don't get scared by it. We just don't have a word that refers to a pure, like we're borrowing understanding and knowing, because our culture is here from Aristotle. After we killed Socrates and we ignored the logos and let Paul abuse people through belief, and religious and political figures say, no understanding for you. If you have a book, we'll kill you. Now today they're burning books and censoring the internet and that sort of thing. But back in the day, they'd literally burn you at the stake for having a book, especially the Bible. And the Bible wasn't even written in a language you could read, on purpose, because of fucking oppression, because of the tyranny of believers. I want to control. I want to be daddy to everyone. I want to abuse others like my parents did to me. So in our culture, in that tradition, which can be traced back to Aristotle and Emperor Justinian, who shut down the academy to create Christianity, bringing in the Dark Ages, and Aristotle, who rejected the whole, or metaphysics, which is why Plato kicked him out of the academy. Because we're in that tradition, our use of the word knowing and understanding only refers to this. So we use knowing and understanding with a capital U and a capital K to refer to this eternal, non-physical understanding. So we really need to use the words dianoia and nous to distinguish it. We can get away with understanding, because even in the physical world, we recognize that understanding isn't about belief. It's about seeing the parts, and we recognize that understanding requires understanding principles. You understand the principles how to create of how computers work to build a computer. But also we recognize understanding requires causes. If you want to understand a problem, what you mean is see the causes and apply those principles. So we can get away with understanding, kind of. Knowing, a bit more difficult, because this experience of the model, the brilliant light of pure being, is rare. Which is the book that we're reading. Socrates said to Jesus, we've both had this experience, but we made a mistake. because we left people who haven't had this brilliant light of being experience to talk about our teachings. They couldn't endure it because of their ignorance and lack of use of thinking to revert upon the model as we're doing here. So we can kind of use knowing with a capital K. Ideally, we'd use the word nous and refer to it as ousia. But seeing as we don't have a word for this, there's no fucking chance we have a word for the kind of knowingness or the kind of ousia of the model of self without parts. And equally so, the functioning of self from it. So the model and functioning, or the use of thinking and mind that reverts upon the model. Socrates gives us a word we can use, phronesis. Ignorance, wisdom, phronesis. It is because it's the highest term, we could understand in principle why it would have to be the most mistranslated word. And if you've ever read the Balboa translation, he uses the word mindfulness. But you can look underneath in the Greek and you'll see the word phronesis. And if you've ever compared it to any of the other translations of Plato which talk about Socrates' teachings, Socrates' conversations, any other translation, you can have a right old good laugh. Because if reading the text requires you to find the different terms and arrange them like this in a map to solve the puzzles, give birth to questions, be on a quest, find the clues, put them together to solve the puzzle, which means every single word fits, is there for a reason. What would you say if the word phronesis in the same book is sometimes translated as wisdom, sometimes translated as understanding, sometimes translated as knowing, sometimes translated as belief and opinion, sometimes translated as virtue? You would have a good old laugh. At how fucking terrible those translations are, considering it's the most important term and it's translated as everything else all over the show for no reason. But we can also understand the reason. We are making fun of these translations, but we can also understand why it has to be, because every translator is themselves human, influenced by their beliefs and functioning from their belief. And what do beliefs do? Have to reject truth. Truth and the true. Truth and the self. In principle, that's what it means to be belief. That's what it means to be a problem or a block. It has to block the logos and self. So the logos, the activity of self, in principle. So yes, if the translator hasn't gone through the activity of removing their own personal beliefs, their beliefs will rule them. That's why it's called a zombie virus. It has you don't have it. So we can recognize all human problems, we can recognize enlightenment and wisdom, the model that all leaders need to have if they rule over souls of people or societies. But also our question, what is the self? What is the knowingness of self that and its activity? What's the ousia and logos of self? What's our highest knowingness and functioning? How do we know and show the self? And how do those two come together in a state called phronesis? I know it's weird that it's a Greek word. Oh, Greek, scary, scary. No, it's just because we don't have a word in English. And we need the word, otherwise we can't play. Right, just as the Roman tradition of Aristotle can't do philosophy. Because here we look at wisdom, we look at the beauty, the justice, the model. Not a model. The Republicans have a model and the Democrats have a model, and they're both horseshit. Because it includes harming people and contradictions and hypocrisy and justifies their own ignorance. But what would happen if we said, what is the model of politics? We wouldn't need left and right ignorance. We would have just one thing. Just like basketball players. There aren't some basketball players who don't follow the rules and make up their own beliefs. Therefore, we don't pick the basketball player who's the biggest con artist to join the NBA. Anyone can play in the NBA so long as they follow the rules. So therefore, the best, most naturally talented and most developed of skills basketball players get to play, but anyone can. Equally so for doctors, and ultimately to become rational is also to demand the same from politicians and spiritual leaders. Whoever has the model and has perfected their skill of the model and can apprehend that model, understanding and knowing, dianoia and nous, can function as a guru. That's it. Not only that, should be made to. Because if we don't have these people in charge, we have fascists in charge. We have ignorance in charge. Now, these people seek power to play out their ignorance as a fake knower. But these people with actual knowing don't want to be in charge because they'd rather contemplate knowing than muck around in the physical world of appearances, chase this or that celebrity or money that means nothing. Therefore, we need to understand this model so that we can make a very, very good case for the best of us to rule. They won't want to be corrupt. They won't want to harm people. That's why we want them in charge. They also won't want to rule over others. Therefore, we have an ethical responsibility as citizens to master this model so we can demand those people be our leaders. So we can be free to do this ourselves. Get the best people to take care of our physical needs and our keeping society in harmony with all life. So we can do this. It's a win-win.
It's a win-win.
Do this, but also to reach our goal of the self. What kind of ousia and what kind of functioning is our highest goal? That's our question. But also the issue is, while this is a model of the whole, we need our specific parts, our differences, to free ourselves from our own particular fake model of our ignorance, our own particular false belief of self and reality that's in opposition to reality and opposition to self. In other words, while we can understand that human problems are rational, A, and solvable in principle, and B, understand that there is an excellence possible for all people, so we can understand that there can be a purification of ignorance and a perfection of wisdom and phronesis, A and B. By having the model, we won't be able to prove it unless we do it. Equally so, we won't be able to remove our own personal ignorance and perfect our own personal reading of these kinds of books from Socrates or Pierre Grimes, which reflect the logos, to gain wisdom and phronesis, unless we have some sort of personal guide that knows about our parts, our past, and how it's causing our present problems and how it blocks us from a good future, knows the model of wisdom and phronesis, to help our development from our problems into that. So we won't be able to prove this model unless we have some way of demonstrating what we're defining. And we won't be able to overcome our problems unless we have all the clues we need to solve the puzzle. In other words, we need to bring in time. Time. If we are having moments in time, here and here in these frames, we have to look at how motion comes to be. We infer motion from moment to moment, but there is an emerging and returning. We have to look at how this works. So we can see how there is a kind of a gap between each moment and what it does in the creation of the next moment to give us the clues that we need to solve our problem. Otherwise, we won't be able to demonstrate that model and solve our problems. Where we are is realizing every thought is... So, while our perceptions through time of each physical moment happen this way, not only that, in each moment we get thoughts. We don't pick our thoughts that come to us, which is why blame, shame, punishment is always fucking stupid, because you don't pick your thoughts. They are presented to you. Equally so, you don't pick your dreams. If we can see how the physical drama that we perceive in our everyday life relates to our everyday thoughts that come moment to moment out of an apparent void and then dissipate. Equally so, our dreams function in the same way. Dreams come out of the darkness of sleep and then into the light of a dream, and then again out and then in 4 or 5 times a night usually. If we can see how all of these relate to explain our everyday dramas, the thoughts, the use of thinking that causes our problems, and the clues about our specific problems from our dreams, then only through this together, these three together, our everyday life, the thoughts that we have in our everyday life, and in particular our dreams, to give us what we need to see how they relate together to keep us trapped in our problems and give us the clues of the origin of our problems through dreams. Only then can we solve our problems and verify this model. By experiencing a freedom from our ignorance and problems, experiencing wisdom states and perfecting it through understanding, the use of our thinking to reflect on the model, the only real way that we can use thinking, but also recognize there is a different kind of wisdom experience that might be very, very easy to miss because it doesn't have qualities. The state of self we call phronesis, and how we need to use our thinking or our use of mind or self to reflect upon it, to perfect that. Now, what we've been reading is dreams give us all three. Gives us high states of mind, including enlightenment states. Gives us these clear states of self that we are very, very easy to miss. And also gives us our problems represented in the states of mind and the traumas that we have in our dreams. While every bit of furniture is a clue to perfecting these and purifying this. In other words, dreams are the only ways we can solve our personal ignorances, our problems, and perfect our wisdom and the ultimate knowing of self. Thus, Socrates said, the key term in this game, bringing the parts together into the model, is absolutely necessary. This is the dialectic. This is the use of logos, our activity, to bring it together into a whole that we can know, ousia, logos and ousia. It's the dialectic. This is the art we hear. This is how we use understanding. This is debate. The problem or the materialist use of functioning or thinking based on false beliefs is debate. Always bad. Dialectic is the use of thinking to revert upon the model, and also you can turn back and help people's problems by asking them a set of questions to illuminate the unsuspected false model of self and that they've identified with and reality that they think they're in, their beliefs. So we can function like a dream maker, like the dream maker. Asking questions through the dialectic to purify our ignorance, asking questions to direct people to wonder about what understanding is, but ultimately even, hey, what's that self that's doing all this? Meaning our dream maker is the model of self-excellence or phronesis that we are after. And it has to have all three for it to be able to function on all three levels for us. And it's the only thing that will give us the clues about our personal problems, and has an awareness of how you're going with your reading, how you're going with bringing it together into the parts, and how are you going with your perfecting of the art of the dialectic yourself. So if it knows all that, and it knows how your problems are relating or blocking your development of dialectic and wisdom, it's dream analysis that is necessary for our return, says Socrates, and that's where we are in the book. So, this is a fantastic model, but we won't be able to see how the model plays out in our own personal lives unless we see how there is a movement from the world of appearances and beliefs and problems into the higher, which means there needs to be a development or motion through time, meaning we have to take this model and put it into how time works. That's where we are in the text. But also we have to, using this model of time, or the third hypothesis of Parmenides. By the way, the first hypothesis is either this or this. He calls it the one self, which I'm guessing is this one, the activity of the dialectic here about on the one self. So there's a missing 10th hypothesis, which is above that. The second hypothesis is that experience of brilliant light of being. And the third hypothesis is this use of understanding. But also, it's how time works. Meaning our perfection of the dialectic would allow us to equally, like the dream maker, function through understanding or the dialectic with a state of mind here, Hercules. A state of mind with the gods in heaven, while also relating most excellently to the shadows in Hades. Time. The dream maker is demonstrating the functioning of the self dialectically through understanding, through moments of time. And we can't prove this unless we do it. Making this model, number one, which has our wisdom and phronesis maybe here, and our physical appearances and problems here, maybe. But also, there has to be an intelligibility of our problems that we perceive, our thoughts and our dreams to help us overcome our ignorance. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a justice. It wouldn't make sense for there to be this kind of intelligence and care in each moment without there being an opportunity to solve your problems. Sure, you play out the implications of your injustices, especially through reincarnation, which is why we say Hades is Earth. We bring with us the false image of the self and reality, which includes justice and beauty. That's our own prison. We bring the conditions for Hades into our next incarnations. But that's not fair unless you can overcome your problems, meaning there has to be a kind of learning, which means there has to be a kind of guidance. We are listening to the guide, our dream maker, to do the kind of learning that we must do and necessarily has to exist. Only that, in that way, can we prove these models, but also and only Only in that way can we reach our highest goals. A freedom from our ignorance, a perfection of our wisdom, but also a state of self, but also a functioning of self, knowing and showing the self. Therefore, dreams are essential for us and for the model. It's the only way you can show it. Prove it. Spam.
But that's funny. It's like the whole business
Model is like, hey, we can trick the platforms, and then hopefully we can trick people into thinking that these are real people to do like this.
Spam in chat.
The internet is all robots. But that's funny. It's like the whole business model is like, hey, we can trick the platforms, and then hopefully we can trick people into thinking that these are real people to do like this.
Yeah, you can't trick me into buying your spam bots, spammer.
I hate to have to tell you this. That was fake. That was AI.
You AI, I hate to tell you this.
Robots will replace that, and that's terrifying.
Terrifying robots.
But that's funny. It's like the whole business model is like, hey, we can, and this is spam.
Dante is eating.
The internet is all robots. You need to flood these platforms with fake people. It is spam. They are trying to convince them to flood.
I don't know if you know this, but like weird dudes exist everywhere.
Please end kink shaming on your show.
All right. So that's where we are. We've got a model, explains ignorance, wisdom, and our ultimate goal of knowing and showing the self, or phronesis if you fancy. We're seeing how that also has to, we have to take that model and demonstrate it here in this film strip model to show how it functions through time. But also we need to connect that to our dreams to show how we can participate in this kind of learning we're all here to do, to overcome our ignorance, perfect our wisdom, and gain that state of self we call phronesis. Dreams are super important. So that's where we are now reading. Let's jump into the text. What do you do for work? Why do you ask that question? What's the reason? I do music. So I have a music channel called Jed Phoenix Music on Twitch. I'm new to Twitch, so I'm still working out how to do it. I'm trialing different setups, but if you want to hang out and support my music channel, it's kind of related to philosophy. I'm pretty much just playing songs that people want to hear at the moment, but we talk about philosophy in between the songs, and the meaning. I gravitate towards meaningful songs. But if you want to support my music channel, it's Jed Phoenix Music on Twitch, and then once we nail it down, it's going to go out to the YouTube people too. We're going to multi-stream. So that's the music thing. Yeah, and you can support that. I'm still tweaking everything, getting it sounding nice, but I'm getting close to rocking hard. Sweet Susie. Yeah. And until this channel blows up, we're literally talking about the meaning of life for all people, how to solve all human problems, how to perfect our own excellence and use of the mind, and how to reach our final goal of knowing the self, which, you know, everyone has problems that they want to solve. Everyone wants happiness and excellence and bliss. Everyone wants to know the self ultimately. So there is a potential for a wide appeal of this channel. But there isn't yet. But one day, everyone will realize. One day. So maybe I'll get all of the followers on Twitch. And then if I have an average of 3 viewers per stream, I get to become affiliate. And then once all the other followers come in, we all want to solve our problems. We all want to be happy. We all want to know the self. Hooray! We all have dreams that we need to understand. It all sucks to be in a world full of suffering. Let's leave Hassan Piker's channel and Asmongold's channel, and those 50,000 people from each come to my channel, and then everyone will have a party. On this channel. and then they'll all subscribe, and then I'll make the big bucks. And that's what it's always been about. It's always been about making the big bucks. Money. That's what it's always been about, baby.
I don't know if you know this, but like weird dudes exist everywhere.
Ouch.
You're a baby. You're a little baby.
I'm a little baby. Sorry about that. I was kidding. But not kidding about the first part. It is for everyone. But it is a puzzle. How do we share that which is most important and for everyone? Because we're all on this hero's journey. On this quest. We're all...
You're a wizard, Harry.
We're all wizards, Harrys. And if I can sustain my channel in this way, we can read more and get into other stuff. We can do more we can do dream analysis for people. We could get into other books. Like there are lots of other books that we want to get into, but you know, time. And yeah, we could do all sorts of stuff. That's the dream. Right now, we have to catch up in our reading because now we have an understanding of the model, how we have to apply it to time so we can participate in that model for our own benefit, and also the significance of dreams as a demonstration of that time model, and also how we participate in it for our own benefit. Dreams, understanding our dreams is essential, but also because the dream maker itself might be that state of phronesis, the self that functions ideally, that we're after. Interesting. Isn't it interesting? Isn't it interesting? That's where we are. Let's jump in. Let's go. Okay, let's start at the beginning. So we've seen model that we've been building. Again, hypothesis, we have to prove it by experiencing it, and only you can do that. So even though we're developing these models and putting these pieces together, you have to see it. There's no one that can convince you. This can't be an object of belief from someone else. It's for you to see. And the better you see it, the better you can function through it for your own excellence, but also for the excellence in relationships. And so just as once enough people realize this is what we're here for, we can demand this of all of our leaders, but we have to make a convincing, good, just case as to why they need to be in charge. So too am I making a case for it. If you get there, or when you get there, join our Discord and share what it was like, what it took for you to get there, what it was like to sacrifice your dearly held beliefs and ways of being, etc. But also use this dialectic that you've mastered to midwife others, benefit everyone else, maybe, if you want. But you know, you get to perfect your art, you get to do more justice in the world, and you get to create a better world for all of us because other people are going through this too. So it would be a
win-win-win-win-win.
Win-win-win-win-win.
A
Win-win-win. So that's where we are. Dreams. Jesus. It would say that dreams have to be, and I might, because we've read this a couple of times, I might brush over it, hit the highlighter parts. We have to reflect on dreams in a non-interpretive way. Eric, I just said, I'm going to drop some parts. That's interpretation, to leave out parts and add parts. So
Whore.
That's for me. But we're doing it differently, of course. Non-interpretive way to show a pattern of being part of a rational order. So this dream analysis that we have to nail down to prove the model and participate in the model for our own benefit and enlightenment and justice has to be a non-interpretive pattern or of reflection, which we call the dialectic, by the way. That's the name for it. Scoot my chair in a little bit. Socrates says, does it appear to you that the dream has to come at the right time for the dreamer to reflect and learn from? So there's timing. Timing is a big part of this. Knowing the model, knowing the parts, but the timing. So what kind of knowledge does the dreamer have to know the spiritual life of the dreamer, but also have an awareness of the timing of how to present it to us in a way we can most benefit from it? So also timing implies timing implies a desire to benefit. So there's the art again. If you didn't care about timing, then you can just throw everything everywhere. Jesus likes that. The dream maker must have an intimate knowledge of the problems we face, even the ones we're not aware of, especially. But also the intelligence of the dream maker must far excel the intelligence of the dream maker. And thankfully we have a map to say, hey, that means the intelligence has to be either the greatest wisdom here or the knowingness of the self to affect both wisdom, ignorance, and also a kind of wisdom here. So either wisdom capital W or phronesis wisdom. Damn it. And there's a beauty in the simplicity of dream messages. It condenses so much in a few sentences and with a few images. It's very insightful and beautiful the way the dream maker fashions the dream. Yes, insightful and beautiful. Insightful and beautiful. I want to push a button. Condenses so much insight, truth, in such a brief sentences and images. Very beautiful.
Where's the passion, dude? Where's the soul?
Such that if you can only remember a few images or a few sentences of your dream, still use that. Record it as soon as you wake up, transcribe it. I'm not sponsored by TurboScribe, but that's been a handy tool for transcribing audio. And it's free. 3 dreams. So you can even, if you want to move fast, set an alarm to wake yourself up 3 times in the middle of the night. Record those 3 dreams. No, twice in the middle of the night. So you've got those 2 waking ups and then the regular morning waking up. And send those 3 through to TurboScribe and you can use AI to transcribe your audio. Such that even a few images or a few sentences are still going to be beneficial because of how profoundly insightful and beautiful Dreammaker fashions our dreams. It has all those features. It's through the power of dreams that dreamer is brought to make connections between our present problem and the roots in our early childhood experiences. We've read a lot about in this book and also in the midwifery book about the root causes of our human problems and the conditions and causes from childhood. Dreams include high and low states of mind or emotional states. So as you reflect as much as you can on what you've remembered of your dreams, let's get rid of these guys. What are the high states? What are the low states? In exploring the high states, you can bring the content, you can bring the full content to the surface. So it's a kind of spiritual thing because you get to understand more of that state of mind that you experienced all at once as a state of mind. This would go to our functioning to revert upon the model, or the model is also an all at onceness experienced as a state of mind. So, but also in reflecting on it and remembering it, you can be brought into experiencing it again. So you have the state of mind again in dream analysis, and you can bring its content to light to perfect your understanding. So, already considering it has a knowledge of your personal problems that nobody else has, it has the map of all spiritual states that few people have, and it has the capacity to facilitate those experiences in a drama that give you the clues for the understanding in a dream. It's already proven itself to be the highest form of spirituality. No guru knows, well, as far as I'm aware, there aren't gurus who know the entirety of your life and the particular problems you've had. There's no gurus who can facilitate a state of being in you like the dream can. There's no, well, it would require a high level of art to be able to present the specific clues about both at the most appropriate time. Therefore, if there is an ideal guru, it would match the dream maker. Necessarily, definitionally. Therefore, dream analysis would be the archetype or the height of spirituality, of personal growth, of psychotherapy in that you move your problems, philosophy, necessary for reading philosophy, developing your understanding, dialectic, while demonstrating the ideal of each. It's a win-win-win-win-win.
Win-win-win-win-win. It's a win. 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 It's a win.
The oracles had too many beers. Too much beers.
But I thought this was actually kind of interesting.
I thought that was an interesting one.
Freaks.
All right.
But I want to be clear, I'm not AI.
No one is AI. Except for the bots. And we say to the bots,
You need to flood these platforms with... But you shut up. You shut the hell up for a second. You're not real.
you're not real. So, in recalling the dream, the dreamer has the opportunity to recall additional material that the dreamer had forgotten as well. So, you, by the way, exploring the high states, the full content becomes visible, surfacing the presence of even more profound states of mind of the dream. So you can re-experience and maybe what you've forgotten in the dream, which is a big thing. In opening up the low states, the dreamer can find parallels of that state of mind or experience in your past, following the DeLorean time machine back to the origin of where you kissed your mum at the dance, the underwater, the something under the sea dance. Michael J. Fox kissed his mother at the dance, and then everyone disappeared. So too, you have an origin scene where you derived a false model based on belief of self and reality, which is in opposition to truth and all of those good qualities, all of those monads, excellence, that had that, what do they call it, butterfly effect, causing the problem that you've been stuck in. And the idea of yourself that you've been identifying with, your mask or image. Some people call it an ego. By the way, thing to note, as you ask questions of the dreamer, if you're the one doing the midwifery part, the dialectician part, you can give them an opportunity to recall parts of the dream they've forgotten. They might have forgotten when they first wake up. So it's a win-win.
Win.
Okay, go ahead.
So you're bringing the logos to dreams, which is our goal, isn't it? To bring the logos, or the proper use of understanding, to our high states and to our low states. And our question is, can we also bring it to that other model, removing the false model in our low states by matching it to our past, re-experiencing those high states and adding understanding to it, which will allow us to experience it in more depth. But also, can we get states of the self? Because that would be all three things you can do. As a human being, as a rational human being, not as a zombie. As a zombie, you're doing the imitation of that. You're rejecting those higher states while reflecting on your false model of self and reality, while rejecting the real self and rejecting the real reality. Cosplaying. Imitation. Distortion. Which is interesting because we said, hey, while mind itself can reflect on itself in this model of ousia and function through that to create our physical world, meaning our physical world is a moving image of eternity, to quote Socrates, I think. The kind of creation that self has is immediate, because it doesn't have qualities to reflect on and use as parts for a model copy kind of creation. So it's even more immediate, like the ideal of the samurai, to act without thinking or planning most appropriately and perfectly for the situation. So if this is a shadow-like immediate reflection, so too do we as individuals here do a distorted reflection in belief. Isn't that interesting? We selves as souls do a similar kind of analogy to reality, only in a distorted way. We create a distorted shadow of the model and a distorted image of self, which is fascinating. So there's an inherent guruship, there's an inherent sageness behind our savageness. Again, this is why it makes no sense to ever punish anyone for problems. They are doing sage stuff, but in a distorted way. In generating a belief based on appearances and being fiercely loyal to your ignorance because mummy and daddy and Jesus and Muhammad and whoever is a shitty, distorted version of what we're really supposed to be doing. Reflecting on the true model. That's self-generated as a true shadow. Which is why we call this realm truth. Truth. It's a true reflection of the true self, or the one self, or the good self. Those are the three primary terms because they are the three primary, they are the naming categories of the sets of logos. For instance, we understand by unifying whole and part, same and different. So those are the duads. We seek our excellence and harmony and justice. Our belly seeks that. Our head seeks to unify the duads, and our heart. So our belly is our desire for us. We have that part of our soul that reasons or thinks, that uses duads. And our soul, or our courage, or our heart to personify it, is our outward seeking. We seek inwardly with our desire, we seek outwardly with our actions, and we reason for both. Those are the three forces of the soul that we unify and call soul. So the set of terms that apply to outward seeking: lesser, greater, and ultimate. So the lesser would be false, the greater would be truth, and the ultimate would be true self. And they're all related because the excellences are applied to each. Fake excellence, our fake model, our fake justice, our fake paradigm. The truth in wisdom, true excellence, true beauty, no, truth of beauty, truth of reality, truth of justice, the paradigm that all spiritual and political leaders must have. But ultimately, as Diotima says to Socrates, in an ideal love and logos-based relationship, you will reach the ultimate of beauty. But in the afterglow of those intense, intimate experiences of that kind of experience of the truth of beauty, you're also experiencing truth. Use that as the groundwork for, or the baseline for, development from truth into true excellence. So the same monads apply to the triads: lesser, greater, ultimate, or false, lesser, truth, greater, and true, ultimate. And you won't be able to recognize that unless you have this very model of understanding. So the understanding recognizes everything as a whole and part, same and different, which means there has to be a crossover, which means a Venn diagram, which means a place for the lesser, greater, and ultimate, and a place for those excellences to sit to make sense of ignorance, wisdom, and our ultimate. So these three categories of thinking, and everything we think is these three categories: perception and existence, cognitive functions as well. The three categories of self-ers, or parts of reason, unnecessarily have to fit together into an ultimate model. So they're all related. And we want to know, what's it like to experience the one true and good all at once as a single self? It also means the dream maker must be operating here, right? If it can give you the truth in those high states, give you the false in the low states, give you an understanding to reflect on each, it's covering all those bases. Now, if it can give you a state of self, which means it must be functioning here, so at least the dream maker is here. Our question is, can we also get states of self in our dreams? So we're adding logos to dreams to uncover those enlightenment experiences that may have been forgotten. And Socrates says it's one thing to have a taste, a brief experience, but another to be integrated or in full union with it. Recognize it's you, which also would require you dropping any or sacrificing any false image or belief about you, so you can be in full union with it. And upon analysis, even the briefest states could have been overlooked, but can bring insight into the nature of self and reality. So here we have self and reality. So Socrates is saying, yep, it gives you all three. The ignorant belief about self and reality in opposition to it, but also reality and self. The dream maker is us in our ultimate form. Now, you might have seen some animes where the main character has some sort of guiding force come into their life and say, you are the chosen one, or brings them into the, what's it called, Isekai world? Brings them into the video game, and brings them into the virtual reality universe. And then the character has to develop. And they're in awe of this guiding force that seems to be godlike. Often it's called God or something. but it's guiding you and it's giving you you have to do these quests at these time, and it's really difficult for the individual because they don't see the whole picture. And maybe if they do a quest, they get to ask a question of this divine. Hey, by the way, what are you? Or let me tell you about my race. And then they show you a vision, and that looks like modern Japan. That looked like my world. Because that guiding figure that's guiding the main characters is themselves from a future where it has done all the quests and reached level 100 or level 99 or 9,099. And because it has mastered all of the abilities, it has all these, well, it can do all these things and guide people, but also guide itself through time. Maybe you've seen this in a film or an anime, or many animes. This seems to be what we're discovering of our own dream maker, right? It has an awareness of our life, our past, our problems, and the present, our possible futures, is guiding us with a wisdom of the entirety of self and wisdom, or self and reality. Giving us information that seems confusing to us, but giving us the clues to solve the quest, make sense of that confusion, and overcome our ignorance. Are we talking to ourselves through dreams? But from different stages of reality, or stages, or we can say stages of reality, or if we're using this model, are these scenes that seem to be moving in a direction that even materialists recognize and call evolution? Are we evolving or moving towards something? And if it's an ultimate, is that end goal the very thing that's doing the guiding in the instant or the gap? What would that mean? And what would that mean about our dream maker? If you wake up in an Isekai anime, which is one of those ones where you wake up in another life, but you're in the video game, or you're a hero. You've gone from a loser to a hero or whatever. Would you pay attention to the guide? Does that analogy help us see the significance of what we're doing? So, it can present us with tastes of enlightenment, but our goal is to be that ultimate character. To be in full union with it. Even the briefest states can bring insight into the nature of self and reality. To remain in that state and to discover its depth brings the mind to realize why it is that the pure light of divine luminosity is a dynamic presence. There has to be a puzzle. Why is it a oneness but also a dynamism? Dynamism.
I don't know.
The dynamic, as we know, is the mind turning upon itself. There we go. Remember how we were saying, what else can you use thinking for but to turn upon the model or excellence or source of thinking? Mind turning upon itself, which is the actual nature of the model itself, which actually proves what we were saying. If the only real thing you can do with the thinking is turn upon the model, and once you get there, you experience the brilliant light of pure being, it is mind turning upon itself, the model. It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win-win-win. Win-win-win-win-win.
It's a win-win. It's a
Win-win-win-win-win.
We always be winning. The dynamic, as we know, says Sok, is the mind turning upon itself. Some of the powers of the mind can then be unfolded and expressed, so we can nail it down in understanding, which might help our union with it. Jesus says it's wondrous to be able to share it, and this is where I come in and I give a heartfelt. And it's wondrous to be sharing it with all of you. Now only a couple of people watching the live stream every now and again. More on the vlogs, which I appreciate. But soon, those 50,000 Asmongold and Hassan Piker viewers from Twitch. And in the future, as you're watching it, I'm glad to be, what is he saying? Sharing it and exploring it step with you. Which is a kind of a joke, but kind of not, because, you know, thankfully the internet. It's not easy to find people who are interested in understanding, solving problems, and becoming their true selves. It's not easy, because everybody thinks they know already, because they have that model that they've never reflected upon, and they don't have the, I don't know, maturity, courage, or people in their lives to ask them the questions. Hey, what's that model? Is it worth reflecting on it? You've noticed other people's beliefs are crap, but what about yours? By the way, what makes you better? You don't think you're better than the fascists? Of course you are. You're way better. You're so much better. What makes you better? Is it your understanding? Has that brought with it empathy and care? Does it allow you to see a sameness? Is it only diminished by any time you might diminish yourself? Therefore, what is understanding? How do you perfect it? What would we like to reflect on the principles of understanding itself, just as you've been reflecting on the principles of other things? And what's the self doing that? Is there an end goal? In the Isekai quest that you're in, because you're in some sort of quest, definitely. All other Isekais and video games is nothing other than a personification of elements of that quest that the author has seen. That's why we like it. What's the end goal? So while it's difficult to ask these questions of regular day folk in a regular day life, there are people who might be open to it around the world that we can access through the internet. So rare birds, but whoever it is that's out there, I share the sentiment of Jesus. I'm just like Jesus. Clip that. It's wondrous to be sharing and exploring its depth with whoever it is who is interested in doing it too, so I do appreciate it. It's a bountiful gift. For the mind to know itself through dreams is remarkable, as is the depth of knowledge it transmits. The dream maker must have an astonishing knowledge of the dreamer. It must know their spiritual path and the stage. So the path and, or the whole and the parts, path and stage. For the dream to have impact, the dream maker must have, as it were, a spiritual map within which to fix each soul's struggle, and knows what is needed to bring the dreamer to realize the blocks that they face. It is the most profound of knowledge and reaches as far as the boundary of experience, says Jesus, because we know the boundary of his spiritual experience is the brilliant light of being. Why? Because in the story of Mark, he has that brilliant light of being experience here, but then he talks with Moses and Elijah, and then gets wrapped up in his false beliefs. So we see a young Jesus hasn't done enough work in removing his problems through midwifery and dream analysis. So it's a cautionary tale, meaning Jesus has not therefore gone on to this. Whereas Achilles does the opposite. He has the brilliant light of being experienced on the battlefield, still has his problems, but then the last part of the book is him doing philosophical midwifery and dream analysis to remove his blocks, so we can go on from that brilliant light of being experienced to true excellence. So Achilles being an example of the worst who can reach this. Odysseus similarly has wisdom, but has to go through this development in his great journey, his journey can be seen as a playing out of what he saw in Hades, of his problem. And Penelope, of course, being someone who's reached that end. Penelope being in a state of self that can recognize the wisdom, but also recognize problems, but has to be even cleverer than men, so even facing difficulties that men don't face, because she has to win the battle without joining the battlefield, or win the battle without fighting. In other words, be cleverer to avoid the horse shit of men. And she has to wade through all her simps by saying, hey Odysseus, even though you may have wisdom, many of my suitors have wisdom. Suitors, we would call simps nowadays, I suppose. Not simps, suitors, potential partners. I want to make sure that you also are doing the work on removing your problems. I will not share my bed or life with you until... Penelope. To benefit each soul, the dream maker must possess an art of dreams. An art, which means it has a knowledge, it has an understanding of the pleasant present plight, and offers a way to resolve the problem for the betterment of the dreamer. Which means an art. Knowledge of the whole, understanding of the parts, has a skill to present it in the most appropriate way that it can benefit. And yeah, benefit is that final term needed for art. So a doctor of the soul, diagnosing the soul's condition, giving the things for its treatment, the means for its treatment, bringing the soul to understand the art as well, which is important because not only are you the main character according to our theory, it's just a theory until we prove it. Not only must it be helping you develop through your Isekai quest, if it's ultimately us, that development has to include understanding what it is doing too. Because that's the ultimate quest, the ultimate skill, the art of all arts, therefore. If all arts require a knowledge of the whole or the model, an understanding of the parts, an ability to present the means for facilitating treatment, to bring a betterment, then if this would be the art of all arts. So as you're going through your Isekai quest to become the ultimate hero, you better be learning about this particular art at every step of the way. So while you're leveling up your fire ability and your healing ability, you better be learning about what the guiding character is doing.
I'm looking for someone to share in an adventure.
At the same time. So also bringing the soul to understand the art itself. In this way, doing philosophy initiates the dreamer into questions that can revert the mind to explore the mind in the most meaningful way. So the way that our questions are being presented through the dreams, we are learning as well through the dialectic. The same or similar questions can be applied to all dreams, and the questions are a pathway into the mysteries of mind. So it's the dialectic applied to dreams, asking a series of same or similar questions in a way that can unlock all dreams, but can be tailored to meet the specific needs of each individual. Taking us back to... we've taken it off the board. We lost our board. We had to restart a second board. The dialectic applied to dreams. Jesus likes that because the idea of a question means one is on a quest. We have to keep these questions that we're having. And ultimately, that question, how do we know the self without parts? How do we revert upon it? What's the highest use of our thinking to revert upon the self? This one. This one. And this one. Along with all of these questions about our dream maker, carry it. Carry it. Ponder it. Do not let go of it. because it's the doorway into the true life of the soul. So it's these kinds of questions that encourage our mind to reflect on the model of mind and self. That's the purpose of life, or the life of the soul. Necessarily, it has to be. It can't be anything else. Equally so, our problems is the same thing, only it's distorted reflection, made not by self or the dream maker, but by stupid parents pretending to be knowers. Fuck them. That's hard to say. For the 8 billion parents on the planet, or however many, easy to say. But for ours, difficult. That's the issue. Not mine. The fake model. In other words, we're doing it anyway, just on the fake model, which is the cause of our ignorance. Whereas what we are trying to do in our art, and the dream maker is doing, is encourage a reflection on the true model of those high states of wisdom, and of course, the self. The two real things we can do. You have a mind? You want to do well with it? You want to know what it is? Do you want to know its reach? Oh, then think about it. Ponder it. Don't let go of that question. By the way, even if you experience the ultimate of mind, pure bliss, are you the same thing as the things you have? You have a car. Are you your car? You have a bank account. Are you your bank account? If you have a mind, are you the mind? Don't you want to know what the self is? The issue? I know it already. My mummy says so. Or I learnt it in the school of hard knocks. My minister said so. My pastor said so. My preacher says so. My imam says so. My rabbi says so. My politician says so. Blah, 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 blah. Ignorance. To think you know something you don't. Well, we make fun of that in principle. It's not a blame game. Because everyone's here. It takes courage to realize that while everyone else is wrong, I too might be wrong. And it requires courage to let go of the things we've been holding on to as life rafts since childhood that might have kept us alive. In other words, these fake models and false image of ourself and reality that rejects our own development is a kind of solution to a problem that no longer exists once you leave the house. So again, punishment is fucking stupid. You learned to lie when your parents were sadists or whatever. You learned to give up your quests for independence because your religion says women are less, or you can't show your face or some bullshit. Kept you alive. That's why racism is so fucking stupid. They act differently. Of course they act differently. They had a different family in a different culture with a different religion. It was a solution that was a kind of solution to a problem that no longer applies. And instead of punishing them like the sadist you are, reflect, understand, and do dream analysis. These sorts of questions are the doorway to the life of the soul, so long as we don't let go of it and we ponder it. The craftsman of dreams only gives the dreamer materials for the dreamer to reflect upon and to ponder. The task of the dreamer is to bring all it has understood into a unity. What does that mean? Pondering and reflecting on dreams awakens a recursive, turning it upon yourself, intellectual ability that matures as it cultivates. So you can keep reflecting, turning about. The content of the dream is the activity drawn from the life of the dreamer for contemplation. The dream comes while we sleep, so that it emerges from the darkness of sleep into the light of the dream and passes again into that darkness. Upon awakening, we revert upon it and reflect. It becomes the object of contemplation. Just as these high states we reflect upon, so too, these dreams emerge out of the darkness of sleep into the light of the moment. but then we use our moment to reflect upon that gap. So you could say wisdom, or the use of the mind through time, is to revert upon the timeless model in the gap between each moment. So too, in dreams, you can spend your life, because of dream analysis, you can spend your waking moments reflecting on the greater intelligence present in your dreams. Therefore, a just society would be to meet all physical conditions that all humans have collectively, share all the wealth, resources, technology most efficiently and renewably, not without little groups that have more than others or sadistic bullshit, so that we can spend our time reflecting on our dreams. If you were to make one change, every classroom, every workplace, every parliament session, for the first half of the day, dream analysis. How about that? Or at least morning tea time, before morning tea. Out of the silence comes a voice worthy of pondering. Surely that is the same as in other things, isn't it? Yes. That very dynamics marks the nature of our existence. We see that in the waking life of man, each thought emerges and returns to an emptiness. In this way, each perception and thought is framed between successive states of emptiness. This emptiness is only an instant. The instant is followed by the moment called the now, and then followed again by another instant. Then the instant is all that is. All that is exists in the instant from which the specific image representing a movement through time emerges. Has a mystery right here. Among the followers, who set this out? That's the third hypothesis of Parmenides. Each moment surfaces what is... Oh, by the way, he says, but there must have been lots of people before Parmenides who knew this. Each moment surfaces what's most proper and due in each present. That moment of instantaneousness which has no qualities. From that comes what's needed for the next moment. That next moment's change and development. There's all that is in that gap, from which a series of moments most appropriately matching the prior and most appropriate for our soul's development. Mystery is where the source of change and motion comes from, is right here in front of us. It takes place in no time and without changing. Yet it's the source of change and development. So it is out of time. At rest. So those duads that we've been talking about. It is out of that instant. So therefore it has to be kind of either this here. The moment has to be either this here, because it's the whole, or out of time. We don't have rest on the board, but because it's at rest, but it's the source of motion, or in time. Or the gap could be self. Also out of time, at rest. Maybe the gap is there. Maybe the self functions through the gap. It has the model of all that is. So Jesus is calling it all that is. But we want to know which of the two is in the gap. Because both seem to be needed for the moments in time. In Tim. Tim is a guy who lived in time. That's why I say in Tim. Let's fix that.
I don't know, whatever.
In time. Speaking of time, how are we for time? Coming on 2 hours. Okay. Let's come to the end of the highlighted parts. It must fit perfectly and be in harmony. Sorry, out of the instant, the moment, of experience arrives, and returns to the source. There's a blip, 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 blip happening, like a movie film. It must fit perfectly and be in harmony with all that has happened in the past, in that past moment. For it to fit so smoothly with the past means it has an astonishing precision that must be the result of an extraordinary craftsman. So part of this art is an extraordinary craftsmanship to craft each moment as it does. Yes, it must have an internal integrity of vast proportion. It must fit precisely the past conditions of each thing, and each thought, and each perception. So here is our things, thoughts, and perceptions. So this model that we have been developing, whole and part, greater and less, we say this is not an opinion, this is not beliefs, and this is a kind of learning that we must be here to do as the meaning of life, because it's universal. Its universality is universality.
All right, enough.
Is that it applies to all things, wholes and parts, sames and difference, all thoughts, all perceptions. It's the necessary building blocks for things, perceptions, and thoughts. But this must be known by our dream maker and the maker of each moment, such that it matches the things that we experience. This shirt is still black in the next moment. The thoughts that we have, there is a series of thinking that I'm doing right now, and each perception. I'm still just as cute in this moment as I was in the last moment.
I don't know if you know this, but like weird dudes exist everywhere.
Oh man. This is what makes understanding, and why I'm the most popular channel on Twitch. It universally applies for everyone, irregardless of beliefs, cultures, your family beliefs, your political beliefs. It's just understanding. It's not a right versus left, us versus them, Catholics versus Protestants bullshit thing. It's for everyone, for always. And if it's for everyone for always, it has to be the only kind of learning that we're here to do. And not only is this map what guides us, it is ultimately what we're seeking to master. So in other words, the Isekai God that's guiding us uses this map to match thinking, perception, and what was the other thing? Thinking, perception, and things, while guiding you to yourself have mastered the map, because that Isekai God ends up being you, the main character. That's the twist. By the way, we can give a name to that craftsman, the Logos. Interesting. So the Logos is the crafter of the moment and our dreams. We're talking to the Logos. That's interesting. I haven't thought about it that way before, but I have had a question for a long time about it. Beyond that, it also carries the wishes and goals of the dreamer to the next moment. So our apprehension of our good and how it relates to our image of ourselves compared to our true goals carries all of it. It knows you. It's the Isekai God of you in the future. And we call it the Logos. It's interesting because the Logos is the activity of dialectic and thinking. Pathologos is the distorted thinking. But also you can know the model through Usia, a pathologos beliefs, or the self-logos in wisdom, the model of mind. But also if it's the craftsman, that means that the fake logos, the use of language poorly, strict dualism, denying the self and mind. Here, pathologos, and the pathologos belief of the self. The self logos through understanding and knowing the model of the self logos, so Usia knowing itself and recognizing itself. He's saying, hey, by the way, the craftsman, the self, is also uses those in each dream, each thought, each moment. So maybe here is the ultimate self-logos, the functioning of the self. And that's our question. What's the functioning in this realm of self? A whole without parts? The at rest that's never in time? Well, if it's at rest and never in motion, it's the gap. If it's... Better put those into. Now we can add into our Venn diagram out of time, or in time, and out of time. It's the gap out of time that's functioning as this ideal craftsman, master artisan. But also, rest. It's never moving. Whereas this, motion. He's saying, hey, by the way, that master craftsman we call the logos, which is itself out of time and at rest, and never doesn't participate in time, but it can give you these experiences in time. By the way, in time means you can have the experience of wisdom in time, in your dream, in your state of being, in your integration into your state of consciousness. Because the model is here, but the gap is here. The self-logos, the logos is here, out of time. You can apprehend the self-logos with mind here and function through it through the dialectic here, which is the ideal functioning that can happen in time because you are in both realms. You are not a slave to the pathologos beliefs and negative use of language. You are most ideal in time by reverting upon the model, the dialectic. Can we jump into the gap? If the wisdom experience is out of time and in time, is that the gap as well? Can our state of mind be in the gap? Which of these two? Seems to be maybe both. Real puzzle here. The name of the craftsman is the logos. However, beyond that, it carries the wishes and goals of the dreamer into each moment. That which without qualities sounds like another idea that was raised earlier, the one. So is that our answer? Since you have returned to it, it may fit even more. Could you count that this as a possible way of answering the riddle of how one becomes many? So that which without qualities, or the one, means this logos it's talking about in the gap is here. That without qualities, one without many, whole without parts, in time without being out of time. But it has to have the model of the whole as well. So maybe it's this whole circle. It has a part of itself out of time in the gap, but also has a part of itself which knows the model of all time. It can't seem to be one without the other, which is fascinating. If the relations are constant and terms vary, the idea of analogy, then you may have one dynamic throughout. So we just might say that in a similar way, whatever springs from emptiness and returns is the mark of generation. If the many is all that is, and moreover, to say that it has sprung in some mysterious way from the one, how can we say that the one and many are successive, so that in becoming one, it's becoming the many is let go, so that in becoming many, the one vanishes? For in becoming both one and many, and in time, it passes through the instantaneous, that does not exist in time, but into this, and out from this the two dance the sacred dance, we philosophers call Parmenides' third soul, its third hypothesis. It is between successive instances that the gap becomes the source of all things. So the one can become a one of many, and then many without one, while the gap doesn't have qualities. So the question is, where is wisdom in this? And seeing as the self seems to be the gap, but has to have wisdom, I don't know, maybe the light is the transition. If the one becomes many, if we have the one, if the many is, if the many is the things that exist in the physical world, or the frame, the in time, or the limit describes perfectly the frame, but the source or the instant is without qualities, it must be the whole without parts. Maybe the brilliant light is the transition from the one without qualities into the moment. If the one creates the many and is let go of the one, there must be a period of time of transition where the one is now touching or becoming the many. And if there's a map or model of all development, it's here. So maybe that's how the self, or the logos, without qualities, uses the model to perfectly map the next moment, or now. Is there that transition? That period of where the one becomes many for as long as to have the whole, then becomes in time, the eternity. Which might make sense of how Hercules can have his state of mind at that part of each moment fully integrated while his functioning is still in Hades, in time. Then what role does the self play in Hercules? And if we have to let go of the one to be many, how is it that people like Socrates or Pierre Grimes can keep that state of self while still functioning as they do in time? This is a big puzzle. Good thing we can carry a puzzle as a question to be on a quest. Let's keep this puzzle and not let go of it until it explodes into a million pieces. This one. I said this one. Hooray. Very exciting dramatic effects. How can we say that the one and the many are successive so that in becoming one, becoming, maybe there's that transition hidden in that word becoming. It's being the many is let go of. And when in being many, the one vanishes. Maybe that's why it says it. We've already read that. Do this and then do this. It's only our attachment to our false belief and image of ourselves that prevents our unifying with the brilliant light of being. Beauty itself. Thus, a love and logos relationship would involve reflecting on our false image to dissolve ourselves from it so both can participate beauty itself. Then from which to derive true excellence. meaning there's a transition from the one into something, but in gaining wisdom or enlightenment, you let go of that to participate in the oneness. Which is out of time or eternity. Maybe that's why people talk about experiencing it like I was there for a millennia or whatever. But you're still experiencing it. Is that why it's the gateway? You're still in a process here. Maybe that's that question we have to ask earlier today. Why is the brilliant light of being a dynamic? Because it's mind knowing itself. But it's still a dynamic. It's eternity, but it's the all of all parts. Maybe that's why they call this the gateway, the vestibule beyond before the good. The gateway. And they say as we die, we experience that to the level of development. We've done the work of removing our false image of ourselves and perfecting our understanding and wisdom, causing our reincarnation back into the next moment with greater intelligence and ability. If that's the case, then, and as terms may vary but relations to say the same, you could say each moment we're engaging in a reincarnation, which would mean because of the transition from the many into the one and in reverse, each single moment has the capacity for that state of being of everything. So each moment is a potential reincarnation. To the extent you've been listening to your dreams and practicing the dialectic to remove your ignorance, and listening to your dreams and using the dialectic to perfect your wisdom, you can experience that light more and more and more, making you more intelligent in each moment, which is nothing other than what we're saying. The only real use of the mind is to reflect on the model of mind. Only now we're seeing that this model exists as the transition point from the one coming into the many, giving it the model from which to make the parts. And our transition is a letting go of the many, which matches our letting go of the false image of ourself needed for wisdom. In other words, if you are attached to your false image of yourself, in each moment you won't be able to participate in wisdom or the instant, the self. Whereas the more you've had courage and support from friends and people like here and people on the Discord maybe, who are learning this together, each moment you have a potential to let go of your image of yourself, which again requires courage and character. This guy
had to admit that the people in his life who helped convince him to be a conservative in the first place, parents, clergy, other authority figures, were wrong. Not only was wrong, but lied to him, and that he fell for it. All of that takes so much courage and character.
Courage and character to admit that these false people you believe were lying to you and wrong. But the more that you can let go of that and be okay with being open and free to each moment, the extent to which you can experience this as a state of mind and integrate it, recognize it, but also recognize it itself is a transition from each moment into the instant, which is the self beyond qualities. There's the Isekai God here, helping you as a character level up to here, become the most wise main character, until the final arc of the series where you realize in order to save Japan, you have to also transition from this best main character in the world to become the Isekai God yourself. Isekai God yourself. That can also guide other people or all stages of your life. All future main characters, and maybe even you. Well, it would be you because it's self. So maybe this is the idea. the one without parts, the transition in each moment, giving us what we need for our reincarnation into a greater intelligence in each instant. Which would mean that we have to keep a question here so that we can be open and receptive to this and this. And never let it go. Because if you let it go, there's a moment you've missed an opportunity for wisdom and self. So don't let it go. To be on a quest is to carry a question. So, relations are constant, terms may vary, as we just referred to. Then you have one dynamic throughout. So we can just might say that in a similar way, whatever springs from an emptiness, so we used it for reincarnation, is to the moment. Terms vary, relations are constant. Whatever springs from an emptiness and returns has the mark of generation, like reincarnation, like each moment, like each dream. If the many is all that is, and moreover to say it has sprung from in some mysterious way from the one, how can we say that the one and many are successive, so that in becoming one, the many is let go of, and when becoming many, the one vanishes? For in becoming both one and many, and in time, it passes through the instantaneous that does not exist in time, but into this, and out from this the two dance the sacred dance. One and many. So becoming one and many. Is this enough to use? Can we use this? Can we use this for how mind can be experienced? This is both one and many. This is one, this is many. This is the moment. This is the instant. That becoming one and many, is that where we can fit mind? As the sacred dance of the third hypothesis, which is, we have earlier in the text said, hey, believers are in a state of conflict. So all human suffering is individually or collectively caused by belief. Which is neat, we can understand that and solve it and evolve. Because it's marked by, hey, all thinking, perception, and existence is marked by these duads. Represent with the triad of false, truth, and the true, or lesser, greater, ultimate, through which we experience goodnesses relative to each. The goodness or the good, and the bad. So that applies to everything. But the cognitive functioning of belief is in opposition to the whole. In other words, you can't know the mind of God. You have to wait till you die. Maybe if you're good, now give me your money and your women's and your land, and let me oppress you. You can't know the mind of God. That's only for Jesus or Paul, because modern Christians follow Paul and not Jesus, as we've been reading. Materialism, the functioning from belief. Also, there is no whole. That's woo-woo or foo-foo. Fooey, wooey, wooey, fooey. Go do astrology, you weirdo. Are you sure? Have you experienced it? No. Then how are you so sure? That would be a belief I've never reflected on. You want to reflect on your beliefs like everyone? By the way, you're doing science, aren't you? What's the model? What allows 1 and 1 to always equal 2? Motion, rest, where does that come from? What are the axioms that you require? Shut up, woo-woo. Okay, so we can mark the strict dualism between the functioning of 5 We can mark the conflict. Believers want to blow up the world and genocide the people and enslave through capitalism. That's 4. Part in conflict with the whole, different in conflict with the same. How can we have sameness? Surely culture war. Ignore the fact that all wealth should be distributed equally. Fuck that. Brown person, look. Conflict. We saw that the greatest positives of each is that state of wisdom here, the model. All parts at all times, all unlimited, infinity, all at once. And we had a question, what does it feel like to be in that cognitive stage of understanding? And we've got a model of Hercules. It's both. It's your state of mind here, the whole, and your functioning here. So it seems to be an ideal state where you can still exist in time. Your state of mind here, but using that state of mind and the functioning from that principles, those principles, the logos, to be a good being and help people in their own struggle. Or as Socrates says, as you leave the cave of ignorance into the real world, we want to make the case that you please return to the everyday goals and prizes and things that these shadow people in the world of appearances only take as meaningful, but now you see that they're stupid. How many Bugattis do you want? How many Instagram likes do you want? None, if it's a fake world of appearances. A projection of people's own collective ignorance and beliefs. But join them. Join them in their struggles and their desires and goals and games they play to help them. Do not stay in that state of mind called dwelling in the Isles of the Blessed. Just like our dreams. How fucked would we be if we didn't get dreams? How fucked would we be if Socrates and Pierre Grimes, Socrates didn't share this? How fucked would we be if Pierre Grimes didn't share this and stayed in the Isles of the Blessed? The brilliant light of being. So the cognitive state that we call 3, which is actually the 3rd hypothesis, that's why we call it 3. The 4th is belief. The 5th is that strict dualism, materialism. Is this the dance? The dance. How can you be self and experience and know mind and creating the now? This is the category that's marked by understanding. Hercules, Penelope, how can your state of mind be here and function most ideally here? Through the dialectic. Is this what we've been looking for in the text? The state of being of understanding? How does it feel like? That would also ask, hang on a second, if you can be in both, can you also, while functioning with your state of mind here and your functioning here, can you also keep a recognition of the instant? Can you do the full dance? Is that the state of understanding? Everything in a dialectic, someone will say something, they'll share their words. In the ideal conditions, again, never ever with punishment, never ever with blame or shame. It's a necessary part of every human's development to pick up problems. You're just holding onto a problem that had worked, no longer does, etc., etc. Necessary for fabric of reality. There has to be a stage of cognitive development, part in opposition to the whole, for there to be a part without a whole, for there to be creation. So again, the most ideal, safe, considerate, encouraging, friendly, philos conditions, they'll share their words. Can you hear their words here in time, reflect it to the true model of excellence and justice, to recognize their false paradigm or belief? but also recognize yourself as self and their ultimate goal of self, and use their ultimate goal and the paradigm of excellence to relate back to them with the next question, most relevant for their development. Is that the art we're here to master of understanding the dialectic? Is that what Isekai God would do? Is that what our Dream Master does? And is that what happens at each moment? Can we therefore have a place for a state of being called understanding, which has a state of mind here, a state of self here, mind, and a state of becoming here? And would that match Hercules and Penelope? And can we call that formally the third hypothesis, or Parmenides' third song and dance? In becoming both one and many, and in time, it passes through. There we go, a transition passing through. We can use that. The instantaneous that does not exist in time, but into this and out from this, the two dance the sacred dance. So we've got a dance and a song. We philosophers often call Parmenides' third song, his third hypothesis. It is between successive instances that the gap becomes the source of all change. The source of all change, but the source of all artistic craftsmanship, like a dialectician, Hercules, Penelope, and our dream maker, the Isekai God. The melody of that song runs through many sacred things, and we just did a big list. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. Praise you, Jesus. I'm sorry.
4 trillion people are still going to listen to this. What if a chimp had a cell phone? Who would he call?
Never thought of
Disgusting. I'm so
that.
disgusted.
Idea. I'm so disgusted.
Okay, go ahead.
I think it's awesome.
Okay. Awesome. Many sacred things applies to that melody and song. Runs through many sacred things. I am pleased to hear this. The gap is surely a most noble expression for the intelligible logos that binds all things and is the source of all. Wow. The intelligible logos binds all things. So we can say at every level there is a logos. There's the pathologos distortion in our functioning based on the pathologos model of belief. There is the logos functioning through the dialectic most appropriately and beneficial based on the logos ousia of the logos, the knowing of it all at once. But also there is that functioning through the instant, the self through the self logos for the creation of each instant. Therefore the logos, well, if there is a functioning of the self logos, there must be something inherently self logos in the self, meaning the logos binds all things, the logos creates all things from that gap. It is also the source of all things, because if the logos is the craftsman in the gap, it's the source of the model of the whole and parts, being the whole outside of parts. And also our expression through our own development of the logos and freedom from our pathologos. So the whole game is bound by the logos. It's the source of all things, and ultimately it's the goal of all things, and it's the ultimate functioning of the self, being the self logos as the expression of all things, the binding of all things, and the source of all things, giving us maybe a smile as we can sing that song and dance that dance. Is that what we're after? Let's wonder about that question. Is that what we're after? The source of all things that binds all things and expresses all things, the self logos, and its transition from a whole without parts through a whole of all parts, a brilliant light of mind, into parts itself. But as souls, we still have mind. So our perfection of our state of mind is that transitional stage of pure mind. Ideally, Hercules and Penelope, functioning according to it, most appropriately to people's parts as a hero or dialectician, especially in dream analysis, while ourselves being in the instant too, recognizing the self logos as the gap and source of all creation that binds all creation and is that Isekai God to which all creation ultimately is seeking its return through the Logos. Holy fuck, is that what it's like to be an understander? The only thing we can do here is revert our mind upon the model of mind, is that the model through which we gain our excellence? And if the only thing we can do here is learn something that applies universally and we can take with us outside of our reincarnation, is this it? Because it's the thing that is outside of incarnations, because it describes incarnations and thoughts and dreams and perceptions and each moment. Therefore, this very thing that is necessarily the only thing we can really be here to do as the meaning of life, are we gaining a better understanding of what it would feel like to be there? So we can recognize it for ourselves, so we can seek it at every moment, so we can carry it as a question, even into our dreams. And also, help each other. As we reflect on our dreams and ask questions, can we best use that model? Best be open to the Logos of dreams, to follow the Logos of dreams to reach that. Is that what we're after? Is that Isekai God? Is that us? Let's wonder about all these questions up forever ponder it without letting it go until the next episode. We will continue to read and let's see where we go. My God, have I mentioned this book's a banger? Have I mentioned this book's a banger? Are we seeing why it's a banger? Explaining all of creation, each moment, and our possible ultimate goal. Accounting for all ignorance, wisdom, and spiritual enlightenment, as well as what's beyond that in the instant, the self, the source of all that binds all, creates all, but is itself without qualities outside of time. I mentioned it's a banger, right? Yeah, it's a banger. Parmenides' third song. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you had fun, and I hope to see you in the next one. Feel free to follow and subscribe on YouTube and on Twitch. You can join the Discord. You can donate to the channel if you like what we're doing here and you want to support it. It is very much appreciated. You can find a PDF link below, and I'll see you in the next one. If you want to listen to music, check me out on Jed Phoenix Music on Twitch.